My name is Serena Joyner and I'm the Group Coordinator for Resilient Blue Mountains. And this topic tonight is really important to me. It's really important to Resilient Blue Mountains as well. I'm zooming in to you today from the beautiful Darug and Gundungurra country in the Blue Mountains. And I'd like to welcome you to this next event in our spring Zoom events. I know we get sick of Zoom, but it has really helped us connect during this pandemic. Our facilitator tonight is Richard Keegan. Give us a wave, Richard. Host of Radio Blue Mountains show and podcast, Let's Do This. And I'm excited to be able to present this event tonight with this panel of incredible young people. We have with us tonight, you can give us a wave, Liv, Emily, Lily, Peter, Joss and Jasmine, and Richard will give you a bit more of an introduction to them soon. I'd like to start tonight with an acknowledgement of country, to acknowledge that we're meeting today, many of us are meeting on the unceded traditional country of the Darug and the Gundungurra First Nations people. I'd welcome you to actually enter into the chat the name of the country, if you know it, that you are on tonight, and to say hello and acknowledge the country you're on. We acknowledge the elders past and present, and we acknowledge all Aboriginal people here today and also those who've been working with us and graciously sharing their wisdom. It's one of the principles of Resilient Blue Mountains that we value the knowledge that First Nations people have used to live sustainably and look at how Indigenous knowledge systems can inform the process of building resilient Blue Mountains. Indigenous people have always cared for country in a way that will support future generations. The 7th generation principle is attributed to the Iroquois people of North America, and it says that any public decisions we make should be capable of providing a sustainable future for our descendants for up to 7 generations. So another one of the Resilient Blue Mountains principles is we recognise our responsibilities towards future generations. So tonight we want to hear from some of the younger generations already with us and hear what they have to tell us. Couple of housekeeping notes for tonight. Please do keep yourself muted to reduce background noise unless you've been invited to speak. If you're able to keep your video on, if you can, it is nicer for the speakers to be able to look out and see you. If your internet connection doesn't allow that, that's fine. We do want you to participate. Can you use the chat box to ask questions? And when we get into the Q&A, I'll tell you how to raise your hand using the Zoom tools. And above all, to be kind and respectful. Okay, Richard, I can hand over to you now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard. I'll be, well, your facilitator host for tonight. We have some interesting young speakers. If you have any questions, please write them down, put them in the chat, or write them down on a notepad beside you and let us raise your hands and let us know. We'll get the chat going and we can have a bit of Q&A at the end of the speak. Now, after the war, post-war, let's not talk about the war, but after the war, we had baby boomers, we had Generation X, followed by Generation Y, then the millennials, Generation Z, etc., etc. There will always be a generation gap from one to the next. But is that gap getting smaller? Today, we have 6 representatives from the emerging generation, 6 representatives who want to make a change. Now, I'm going to introduce each one of those representatives, each one of those people now, and let them talk for a few minutes. And as I say, write your questions down, we'll come back. We're going to start with Olivia Parrott, Youth Advisory Committee at Headspace. She also works with the Women's Centre and Farm It Forward. If you don't know about Farm It Forward, look it up. It's a great initiative. Climate anxiety. It's not isolated for those who are over 25. Olivia is seeing firsthand the effects of climate anxiety on the young people of today. So Olivia, from my generation in the 20s, we didn't talk about anxieties or fears. What services are available? How can you help us?
Oh, in the mountains, we have quite a few services that can help. I'm really happy that we've got a Headspace, and it's been open for over a year now. We've got MIST. There's also Stride Mental Health, which is in Park Street. It's kind of more hidden than some other ones. And the Women's Health Centre. Those are the ones I know of in Katoomba. And we are doing a lot of work, if not already burnt out, trying to help young people in the mountains, especially after having such a tumultuous past couple of years. I think we've had fire season, floods, and a pandemic all crammed into a few years.
Yes, yes. So you're seeing the effects on the younger generation now of this climate anxiety.
Yeah. So I think young people are way more likely to experience the effects of climate anxiety, and they also will continue to experience that anxiety throughout the rest of their life now. And it's particularly bad because they're at a stage of their life where they're way more vulnerable to the effects of stress and anxiety. And it tends to lead to more vulnerability to developing other mental illnesses, such as depression and substance use disorders. I've seen this through my work as a youth mentor. I work with quite a few kids in the mountains, and especially during the pandemic when everything's been closed, their overall anxiety is quite high. They've been turning way more to drug and alcohol use as just something to do, some way to cope. And it's really concerning for me. And they haven't got school to go to and have some sort of distraction and have a social circle there. So I'm quite concerned and feeling a little bit helpless about it, because there's only so much that I can do and that services can do to address climate anxiety.
When you say you're concerned, should there be more resources? Should we as adults be providing more as resources?
I definitely think so. I think just being able to openly say, or let young people say that I'm actually quite anxious because of climate change and not be judged for it would be just an excellent first step. A little while ago, I tried to find some climate anxiety sources to provide to Headspace, and I found there really wasn't much at all. There were maybe a few documents, and I think that's because there's only not much research on it either, because I tried to have a look through and see how climate anxiety is affecting young people, and there's just not much out there about it.
Well, it's not really a new thing in a way, climate anxiety, because you can tell by the grey hairs I'm an old person, but I do remember anxiety from a climate anxiety when I was a teenager, but we were the other way. We were worried about an ice age.
I think it's funny how it's completely turned around. We've just changed the direction. I think environmentalism has always been around and people have always been concerned about the environment, but I think this is become more deep set and more almost existential in a way, because I know young people, they hear everything that's happening, they think, are humans even going to be around in the next couple of 100 years? They have just these catastrophized thoughts about it, and there's nothing telling them that they're not going to that's not true. There's no action being done in government levels to say no, that won't happen. There's nothing calming them at all.
Yeah. What are you seeing that is helping? What are you seeing right now that is helping the younger those people with that anxiety?
Well, I think just to start with some local actions that are happening, Headspace with Farm It Forward has created an amazing backyard. They're growing veggies and getting a lot of young people involved with learning how to be more sustainable in their individual lives. I know there's also a community garden in North Katoomba, and I've been there a few times and it's beautiful. And I think that's also a nice kind of thing to say we're doing something about it, but that's just community level. I think seeing young people go to protests for other young people, I think would help have some sort of sense of control, seeing there's actually something we can do about it. And I think the moves by other countries towards addressing climate change is bringing a bit of ease, but I don't think there's a lot past a community level addressing it.
Yes. With Headspace, what sort of work are you doing there?
Personally, at Headspace, on the Youth Advisory Committee, I've created a group, and we're working on doing some other ones to address social connectedness within young people, especially after the pandemic and the lockdown. That's what we're trying to do first. We're just trying to create a social network for young people that need it. And we're planning on using the backyard and encouraging more people to come in the summer. I also liaise with other clinicians at Headspace. We talk about how we're helping young people, especially with the overwhelming amount of people coming. We've had to change a few ways we're going about the sessions, making them shorter, making them on a needs basis, which is probably not what we want to hear, but it's just a way to cope with the load.
It must be hard to organise a social network when we've been in lockdown for 100+ days.
It is proving very difficult to get people to engage at the moment. And I want to acknowledge that the services are working very hard, but it is really hard to engage young people in a meaningful and long-term way. I think they're quite burnt out from doing anything online, and it's still difficult to do things in person at the moment. And I think I'm really just waiting for like December and next year to hit, just so we can try harder and hopefully have them engage, because it's very hard right now.
Yeah. I just picked up the phrase you just said, burnt out, and it's it's a little scary to hear you say that for yourself and for the younger generation to be hitting that burnt out stage.
Yeah, it's not something you want to hear. It's something you hear people in their 40s who work an office job have burnt out, kind of. That's what you would usually hear that word being used. I don't want to be using it for people who are 12, 13, 14, but it's true. Wow,
12 or 13 to be burnt out. That's sad. That's disappointing to hear and sad. So we definitely do need change, and we need change across all the generations.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Well, I'm going to move along. I'd love to talk to you a lot more, but no, thank you, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And yeah, there are areas and people out there like yourself who can help. And yeah, if anyone needs to know those numbers, I'm sure they can contact us or myself, and we can pass those numbers and the messages on.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Liv. Don't go away. All right, now coming up next, Emily Tyrrell. Emily Tyrrell works in the Youth Outreach and Macquarie Electorate. She is another person with insights into the youth mental health and the needs that aren't being met across our federal electorate. Emily, are you seeing the same kind of things on your side that Olivia was just talking about, burnt out at 12?
Yeah, I might just introduce my work a little bit more to give it a bit of context.
Please.
So I work for Susan Templeman, our federal member for Parliament. I've worked with her for 5 years now, and have been on her campaign been campaigning with her for a Headspace in both the Blue Mountains and the Hawkesbury, basically the whole time I've been working there. I'm 22. I grew up in Windsor, so not up the mountain, just a little bit down, but don't hold that against me. And I have a sister that lives in Windsor as well, and she's been quite involved with MESCA. So if you might all know Chloe more than you know me, that we're a bit of a team in this kind of space. And so yeah, what we've been doing as part of the Headspace campaign, we've identified a lot of local young people that really need this, really want to see it happen because of their own lived experience, or because of experiences that they've had with their friends. And because of that, we've kind of got them in a group. There's about 30 people. And we, at the moment, are doing calls into the electorate to check on people, how they're going, just to give young people, another person to talk to, rather than, someone that lives with them that they've been locked down with for however long. So through that, we have identified a lot of people are struggling with, the general anxiety of lockdown, but also are frustrated with the lack of action on climate change, as was identified before. And then a lot of things to do with the lack of tourism in the area, meaning that a lot of the jobs that young people do, behind the, like at a counter, behind the desk, are not there at the moment. So that's really frustrating. And then in the mountains particularly, a lot of people coming home after going away for their university degree and finding that the jobs that they envisioned that they were going to have once they started uni are not necessarily there. So we're picking up a lot of things, a lot of issues, a lot of big picture issues in the outreach that we're doing. But a lot of it comes down to, or could be helped by, immediate mental health services in the Hawkesbury and Blue Mountains. And that means a fully funded Headspace at Katoomba, and it means a full service in the Hawkesbury as well.
It's interesting that you're talking about a loss of jobs, because the Blue Mountains, and I live in Katoomba, we're a tourist town.
Yeah.
We rely on the tourist dollar, but as I just said, we've now been 100+ days in lockdown, and it's been like a ghost town in the main street. So the jobs, as you've left school, you're not finding jobs in the local area. Yeah,
that's right. And people don't want to move away from the local area, whether they are Hawkesbury or Blue Mountains. They love it, and it's community, it's the people that they've grown up with, and it's also the beautiful natural environment that both towns live in. And it's kind of disappointing to be told that you've got this great mark after high school, you can go and do uni, you accumulate this HECS debt, but you've been told that it's all going to be worth it in the end. And then you come back and, the only jobs that are available are the job that you had before you went to uni, or even then that job's not there anymore. So it's really tough in terms of having that great outlook, or that kind of like excitement that's always associated with youth. And then, as Liv was saying before, I think a little bit of the burnout comes from all of that kind of accumulating together. Yeah.
You mentioned Headspace, so you'd like to see more in the Headspace health services. What sort of things would you like to see added?
Yeah, so Susan, many people probably know her personal story, trying to find mental health services for her daughter. It's basically the reason that she's got into politics, and having experienced mental health issues myself, it's also something that I'm really passionate about. So we've continued the push to not only have the Headspace at Katoomba, which shouldn't be a satellite service, it should be a fully funded service, as Liv suggested there, the need is there. We'd also like to see another service in the Hawkesbury, because kids in the Hawkesbury at the moment, they've got to drive to Penrith, which, it's really hard if you don't have your licence. And if you don't have your licence, I think there's a bus that leaves at like 9 a.m. and there's another bus at 5. So, or else you've got to get the train to Blacktown and then all the way up to Katoomba. So it's just, there's no mental health services in the Hawkesbury, and they've been hit with fires and floods just like the mountains. So we want to see a Headspace for the Hawkesbury. It should have been delivered already. We know that the government has the money for it, but it hasn't been delivered yet. So we're keeping the pressure on, and so all of our amazing young people, to try and get this delivered now when we need it, rather than when the government reckons it should just, announce the funding.
With such a commute to get health services, is it a case, do you think, where people, your generation, are just saying, bugger it, I can't be bothered going?
Yeah, that's the thing. Or kind of, I don't know, it's, for myself, when I was in that position in high school, it was kind of just grin and bear it and like let it get worse until you do have your license, until you do know how to access mental health through your GP. And even then, good luck trying to find a psych that doesn't have a gap. So, I think I'm very lucky in that I moved to the city for uni, and there are many more services there, and it was easier for me to get help that way once I moved out. But for people that are in high school still, it's really ridiculous, and they're not reaching out for help because the services aren't available.
Yeah, and it's hard to do that initial reach out, that first recognition, hey, I need help.
Yeah, exactly.
And if the services aren't nearby or it's hard to get to, that makes the decision to not get help, I dare say, easier for them to say, yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah, which is also why I'm really proud of the small group of volunteers that we've got, helping us at the moment, because they've acknowledged that, most of them have acknowledged that I've lived through this, or they've acknowledged that their friend has lived through this, and they've taken the courage to do something about it, even though it's like, it's not their problem. It's a problem of government and politics and everything else, and they've still said, if I can do one little thing to help, I'm going to do it. And it's just that kind of resilience and bravery, I think, is something that our generation really has going for us. I think that kind of, and we can see it in our wonderful climate activists in the electorate as well, who are just fed up and not afraid to tell everyone that we are, so yeah.
I'm writing that down, our resilience and bravery. That's a wonderful line. By all means, get up the government, get that money out to where it belongs. Make, as you say, make Headspace a more permanent, not part-time.
Exactly.
No,
and I know, I think that's, as both someone that works for Susan and who lives in the electorate and so votes for her, right? I think that's why we're so lucky to have someone that has actually taken a chance in employing a local like me and to do this type of stuff, to do youth outreach, and to be someone that if anyone in this Zoom call or anyone else in the electorate needs someone to talk to, or has an idea about what they want to see, or has an issue in youth policy that they want something done about, I exist for this reason. I exist to listen to you guys and to make sure that someone in power is listening to what you have to say. So bring all of that courage to all of your elected representatives, and make sure that your voice is heard.
I've added that: resilience, courage, and bravery. Yes. While you were talking, Olivia has put up the phone number for Headspace in Katoomba, and for Lithgow. And she's thrown that in the chat. If anyone does need to contact or reach out, the numbers are there in that chat line. Thank you very much, Emily.
No worries.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I'm encouraged by your bravery, your courage that you're showing there. We're going to move on to our third speaker now, and Lily Joyner. Lily Joyner is a member of MESCA, the Macquarie Electorate Student Climate Activists. Now, for those who don't know, MESCA is a youth-led network of students across the Macquarie electorate who campaign for climate action and climate justice. So I'm curious to hear what Lily's got to say, because I'm curious to find out how today's school students can make a difference. Lily.
Yeah, hi. I actually have a lot to say. I have a speech written out, so I would like to read this to you. So I'm Lily Joyner, I'm 14, and I'm from MESCA, the Macquarie Electorate Student Climate Activists. I'm in year 8 at high school. I go to weekly climate change meetings and I send emails to politicians. I hold up signs and I voluntarily lose my voice at protests. I am among the thousands of young people who skip school for those protests. I do and say a lot of things, but today I want to talk about you, the adults. Being an adult probably means that you're employed or once were. You can vote, and you have in the past. For the most part, you get to choose where your money goes, such as which bank you go with, which energy company you rely on, which car you buy, what food you buy, etc. You've probably got quite a bit of influence over yourselves and your family, maybe even the company you work for. You might make really big decisions, ones that affect a lot of people. And these things, all of them, are things that young people tend not to have. Young people might be employed, but not always, and usually not in any big positions. A young person can't vote unless they're over 18, and even those who are mightn't have had the opportunity yet. Young people have varied control over their money depending on their age, but for under 18s in particular, this control reaches no further than where we put our pocket money. You see, adults have tools that young people don't have. Adults have power that young people don't have. But at the same time, us young people have a power that no one else has. We have influence, and this influence is unlike any other. It's like our superpower. Research by academic Danielle Lawson has showed that young people have a huge influence over the adults around them. Lawson and her colleagues designed something that they call educational intervention. There were 2 groups, each containing about 120 children in total, the treatment group and the control group. The children followed a climate change-based curriculum designed to encourage and promote intergenerational communication around climate change. The major findings of the investigation had some interesting conclusions. Unsurprisingly, the children following the climate change curriculum became more concerned about climate change than other students. Also quite expected, those children went home to talk about it with their parents. But the most interesting finding was that the parents who were most influenced by their concerned children were also those who had the lowest levels of concern prior to the experiment. It led to a number of media stories saying that children are the best communicators when it comes to convincing the unconvinced. Rebecca Huntley puts it quite well. The messenger is more important than the message. It showed the world something that it sort of already knew. Adults have a soft spot for children, which gives us the sort of influence that doesn't really exist anywhere else. So, considering this, I would like to ask you a question. You don't need to answer it out loud or tell it to anyone for that matter, just think about it. How did you feel when you first saw young people striking from school, taking to the streets to call for climate action? I can imagine that it would have been a strange feeling. It was during these very protests, the school strikes that rocked the globe, that young people began to wield their greatest tool, their superpower, if you will. Those school strikes got a lot of people talking about a lot of different things. Some people saw them as silly, said that the young people should be in school. Some people were proud of us, even supported us. But regardless of what was being said, it was being talked about because it was impossible to ignore. The young people of the world were furious. They were taking to the streets and crying out to you, the adults, the older generations, the ones with tools and power that we young people don't have. The truth is, young people need your help. We can strike, we can protest, we can write emails and letters and whatever else. We can influence people through social media, through speeches, through posters, of course, but there are so many things that we can't do. There's something that adults like to say to us, that the future is in good hands. But the thing is, our hands don't hold the future at all. You do. You, as adults, have tools and power that we don't have. The future is not in our hands, it's in your hands. And it's up to you, the adults of the world, to protect it for the young people. What I ask of you is that you sit down for a moment and think about the tools that you have. Think about what you, as an individual, have to offer to a much larger movement. It might be big or small, or hey, maybe it's medium-sized, but anything, any tool, any knowledge, any power, any action is valuable. By talking to your community, your business, your friends and your family, by making choices that put life over money and never the other way around, you will be using some of your many tools as an adult. I'll admit that solving climate change would be much easier if governments were going to help us, but don't let inaction deter you from action. Now, to summarize all that, because I know that's a lot of words, the reason we young people are protesting is because we want climate action, but the aim of our protests is to call out to you, the adults, the older generations. When young people are protesting, we are protesting because we are trying to talk to you. We are trying to get the message across from one generation to another. We are calling out for help because we need you, because we can't do this alone. Think about your tools, your power. You have some, everyone does. And if we all come together with all our tools, abilities, and power, we will all solve climate change.
Thank you, Lily. How did I feel when I saw the school children on strike? Yes. I skipped school. Don't tell anyone. No one's listening. Just you and me, right? I skipped school when I was 15 to export Fraser, not uranium. And I still got the little button that I wore on that day in town hall.
That's
so
great.
Yeah, I was all for you have the children of the youth of today saying yes, stay away from school. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. Thank you, Lily. I will point out to everyone that yes, we will have a Q&A at the end of everyone's little talk. So if you have any questions, put them down on the chat, and we'll take a note of it, and we will ask everyone around, or just raise your hands and we'll get around to all the questions as we go. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Lily.
Thanks.
Very good. Next up is Peter Legra. Now, Peter Legra just finished his energy degree and is a professional energy engineer for AGL. Now, in the 60s, and again, I'm coming back to my age, I was brought up with the Jetsons. We were sold the dream of flying cars. Nuclear energy was the way of the future. But when, we had 3 Mile Island, we had Chernobyl. When somebody mentions and raises the nuclear flag now, I put my fingers in my ears and go, la, 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 la. I don't want to know. Is that the right approach to take? Peter, you've got some ideas on nuclear energy.
Yep. Hello, everybody. A full disclosure, I am a solar boy. I majored in photovoltaics for my energy engineering degree. And I'm obviously very much into the whole climate and clean energy debate. And of course, recently, nuclear power has once again entered the debate as a low carbon energy alternative. Now, of course, the debate has traditionally been very much focused on the safety of nuclear power, especially with Fukushima and 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. And of course, those are very much valid concerns. But I wanted to offer a sort of more niche perspective into why we might not want to pursue nuclear as a clean energy alternative. So I'll be taking that from the perspective of engineering, and also from sort of a societal and ethical perspective as well. Hopefully I'll be able to teach you all a little bit about something that isn't often talked about. So, of course, the first sort of major barrier to nuclear energy is cost. So, nuclear has a very high capital cost. So, it's very expensive to build new nuclear. And when we have like expensive electricity, that also is passed on to the consumer. So it's very much, we want energy to be freely accessible to everybody. At the moment, nuclear is far more expensive than any other generation technology. And it's one of the few generation technologies that actually has a negative learning rate. So solar, for example, is getting cheaper as time goes on, but nuclear is actually getting more expensive because it's being phased out. And even the small modular reactor technologies that are being developed are not expected to become any cheaper, even within the next 10 years. So these sort of technologies are sometimes in excess of 10 times more expensive than solar. And that really decreases the accessibility of energy to the to Australian energy consumers. And so climate change is not going to be waiting for the technology of new build nuclear to catch up. So AEMO AEMO is the Australian Energy Market Operator, and they commissioned a joint study with CSIRO to determine which new build energy generators are most equitable and provide the fairest and cheapest energy to Australians. And nuclear is right at the bottom of their list, whereas solar and wind are at the top. Now, one thing that I have rarely heard talked about in the nuclear debate is the energy engineering perspective, which is fair enough because it's quite technical. So the main gist is that nuclear generation is what's called inflexible generation. So this means you cannot easily have a reactor change its generation output, and you can't turn it on and off very easily at will. So in this way, it sort of has the opposite problem to solar and wind, in which solar and wind is variable, you know, the whole rhetoric of the sun's not always shining and the wind's not always blowing. Nuclear is a little bit more like a car that doesn't have brakes. So it's always going full pelt unless you spend a bunch of money turning it off. Now, in electricity grids, the amount of electricity generated must actually match the electricity demand. So if this balance were to be disrupted, the grid frequency could not be maintained. So in Australia, this is 50 hertz, and even small deviations from this value can spell disaster for grid stability. And we can't have the lights going out. So basically, generators are dispatched by necessity. So for example, if the demand is low, then only a few generators will be dispatched, and the wholesale electricity price is lower when there's low demand. So the order in which generators are dispatched is chosen by price. So those generators that bid into the market at the cheapest price are considered first. And this is called the short-run marginal cost of generation. And it's typically determined by fuel and as well as operation and maintenance costs of the generator. So in the case of solar and wind, the marginal costs are low because essentially once you build the solar and wind, they don't cost anything to run. So therefore, solar and wind are always dispatched before thermal generators. So when solar and wind are online, they kick coal and gas right out of the generation stack. So coal, gas, and nuclear would actually be kicked out of the market. So traditionally, nuclear is operated as baseload generation and rarely needs to switch off. But now with this high penetration of renewables, it's we've got this situation in which the energy demand is low, the solar generation is high during the day, and suddenly the nuclear reactors are getting kicked out of the market, but they can't just suddenly curtail their generation. So they have to pay in order to stay online, and then those costs are passed to the consumer. So fundamentally, nuclear is not really suitable to be operated in a grid that has high renewable energy penetration. And my third argument is that the Australian grid is sort of moving away from centralised generation. So the energy market operator have quite clearly outlined in their integrated system plan that the roadmap towards grid decarbonisation will be dominated by flexible distributed energy resources, particularly rooftop solar, batteries, microgrids, virtual power plants, and demand response technology. And so this decentralized generation has significant societal and technical advantages over centralized generation, such as nuclear, coal, and gas, in which distributed energy resources are owned by the community, whereas centralized generation is usually operated privately by gentailers who operate in a for-profit oligopoly. So free electricity is, I think, the way of the future, but that's not something that can be achieved through centralized generation. And as it stands, the major proportion of consumer electrical bills is actually from network transmission costs. So that's your poles and wires. And so in the future, these flexible distributed generation is going to be strongly favoured. And there's actually rules that are coming into effect very soon, such as 5-minute settlement and various ancillary service markets that pretty much only allow flexible technology such as wind, solar, and batteries to participate in. So yeah, in summary, I better wrap up. Nuclear is pretty much too costly and too slow to develop. and it's fundamentally incompatible with high renewables penetration, and I believe it cannot provide a fair and equitable electricity market.
That's a interesting call. So what you're saying is we may never see nuclear power as for households here in Australia.
Yeah, so to quote the Clean Energy Council, nuclear would require a small miracle to ever be deployed in the Australian grid. And of course, I'm not even touching on all the NIMBYs and of course the safety concerns and all I mean, there's tons of stuff I haven't mentioned, the water requirements, all kinds of things, nuclear waste disposal, decommissioning. It's yeah.
In 10 minutes, you've given me 20 questions, but yeah, you haven't touched on a lot. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to Joss Hill. Now, Joss is from the Extinction Rebellion, who's a young man who'd like to see action rather than passive support. Now, that's a topical statement considering the Glasgow Climate Summit, COP26, is in just 2 weeks' time. Are you expecting something meaningful to come out of this summit, Joss?
I wish I could say yes, but frankly, ever since I can remember, I've seen inaction going on and on. I remember driving past a coal-fired plant when I was 5 very distinctly and thinking, "Ooh, this can't go on. This is concerning." That's 16 years ago. So yeah, I've been involved with Extinction Rebellion to push for the change that I would like to see. And I know I probably don't really need to remind anyone here of the severity of the climate situation, but there's a few things I'll mention because I'm very scared of the future. I'm very scared of my future. I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but I learned recently that on our current emissions reduction course, Australia will be at near net zero emissions by around 2300. So that's, well, concerning. So essentially on our current course, we're passing all the tipping points, really. The Amazon's turning to savanna, sea ice is gone. It's not reflecting heat anymore. There's conflict as billions of people are displaced and move around a world that's experiencing dramatic resource deficiencies, permafrost melting, oceans acidified, more species going extinct by the day. We've heard it all, and I've grown up with it all. And as a young person facing this future, I am basically very scared. I choose to be hopeful and I try to be active rather than dwelling, but when it comes down to it, I'm very scared. I think Australia's climate and environmental movements had actually reached an impressive point before the pandemic. We'd seen the disastrous drought. We'd seen the largest environmental protests in our history, followed by the Black Summer fires. And after having climate breakdown kind of smacked in our face like that, it seemed that there was some movement and political pressure developing before COVID jumped in to literally lock down our parade. And again, dealing with the COVID economic fallout could have been a moment for a boom in green energy, but instead we're facing a gas-led recovery. So in this moment, it seems to me that we've actually possibly lost some progress and some momentum when there's really still just as much to be scared about. So I think all I have to offer really is a plea for action. It sounds obvious, but I think action and doing is the key. We can spend a lot of time lying awake at night and we can spend a lot of time discussing, and discussing is important, but we know that movement building and having as many people involved as possible in changing or pushing our institutions to change is essential to our survival. There are, frankly, a confusing number of ways to do this in the climate movement, I'll admit. I think there are, you know, as many organizations and bodies as there are people involved. But from my point of view, anything that unites us around changing our current course is worthwhile. We know all the facts, we have the evidence, we know that change needs to be pushed for, and it's not looking like it'll come without that push. So let's do it. You know, we have so little time to enact such important changes. We haven't got time to agonize over details or how we disagree. It's critical that we recognize, I think, the responsibility that comes with all of our privileges. We need to recognize the fact that really we're quite lucky to have avenues of effective change that we can push. I think we need to be moving now. We need to go one step beyond whatever level of action we're already at, whatever we're comfortable with. And it's important. Nothing is more worthwhile. So really, I think my main point that I'd like to be heard on is that in order to make change, so I needn't be so scared, we do need active involvement rather than passive support. You know, we need doing rather than watching, because it's the issue of our times.
Yeah, you say that the facts and the evidence are there. With collectively, we now have more information at our fingertips than anyone has that ever lived before us. Why do you think it's so hard for us to make that change happen? Why is it so hard to make the change, put those changes in action?
Oh, look, it's money, really, isn't it? Money makes the world go round, but it's also going to stop it going around for us. You know, you don't have to look very far to see fossil fuel donations to both major parties. You don't have to do that much research to see the revolving door of politicians going to corporations and corporates going into politics. It's the most diabolical level of corruption you can think of, really. That's
it's politics, but is it in money? But is it also part of human nature? I'll just play a bit of devil's advocate. We've always lived in a one better environment. You know, I've got a pyramid, and my pyramid is going to be bigger than his pyramid. My castle is going to be bigger than his castle. My national debt's bigger than your national debt. You know, as human beings, we're always striving to be one better than the guy next to us. Is that part of what's driving the change in the wrong direction?
Oh yeah, it is. I'm sure, you know, if I'd grown up with in the same situation as Scott Morrison, I'd do the same thing. If I had the same forces at play on me, I'd act the same. But it's not about individuals being better than each other. It's about a system that creates that competition, in my view. And as much as we always want to be one better than each other, I think humans also have amazing potential for cooperation and surprising ourselves with what we can achieve, I think.
Yeah. I think if Scott Morrison was here, he'd be saying, hey, my lump of coal's bigger than your lump of coal.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Cooperation between all the generations, I think, is where you're looking for.
Any action, frankly, I'll take anything.
Yes, any action. Thank you, Joss. Thank you, Joss. It's good to hear your thoughts and opinions.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our last speaker now, Jasmine Cook. Jasmine Cook's just started Year 12 at St. Columba's. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Part of the Blue Mountains Youth Council and a climate striker. After listening to everyone already so far, Jasmine, I think I have to apologise for my generation. We blew it. You know, we done it. Yeah, we were sold dreams of availability. Yeah, we were sold the dream that just didn't work. And as Joss just pointed out, we now know what's happening, but
It's
we're
not over
not
yet.
we're not having the change.
Your generation, you're not dead yet. There's still so much you can do right now, right here. I mean, if our generation was sold the lie that we couldn't do anything, I wouldn't be talking here. If any of you truly believed that there was nothing to be done, we couldn't live with ourselves. It's waking up every day and believing that there is a change that you can make. It's something that young people, I think, as was touched on earlier, that there has to be a change. But it's something that adults, again, and we touched on this as well, can change. You are in the rooms, you are still there. I mean, as you talked to Richard, like, you got to the rooms, yes, in ways that perhaps look very different now and look scary and are scary for young people and are detrimental for our mental health, but it's that going forward, and there's so much going forward we can do. And I can't be stuck as a young person, as a lot of young people are, I can't be stuck thinking about how bad it could get, because you're very right, it could get really bad. In fact, you're right with predictions and everything. If we do nothing, it will. But we don't have to be passive. There's a choice we can make, and there's a choice that young people are asking you to make. And it's not even a very hard choice. It's a choice to care for one another. It's a choice to care for the environment. It's a choice to do the things you lost hope that you could do. Because I think that young people have that type of hope that perhaps adults have lost a little bit. So I don't think it's a hopeless message at all.
So you're hoping to break the cycle so that we can collaborate and create vibrant, regenerative cultures for all.
Absolutely. I mean, if we continue on thinking that your generation is done, that it's my generation's job and we've got to go and fix it ourselves, we will fail. Very promptly, we will fail. And then we will pass that burden on to our children, and we will believe that it's their choice. When really we get to, right now in this community, in this world, we get to wake up every day and make that change. It's not over. I mean, the past is over, but the future is so far ahead of us. And young people are depressed. Young people are anxious. Young people are sad. And you can be told that any way you want to. You know that. If you're adults, you live in a society, you know young people want things. They always want things that they can't have. And you know that the stuff we're looking at is very scary. But you also know that we can change it. So.
Are you feeling a degree of frustration with that the younger generation doesn't have a louder voice?
Yes. No. Young people have a loud voice. It's adults' ability to hear it. We talked about the climate strikes. We talked about the climate strikes like their history. I have a legal studies textbook where it's chapter 17. Young people got together and did the thing. But it's not past tense. We still exist. We still exist just as you exist. And just as you cried out for us then and said, yes, you're doing the right thing, you still should be now, because we're still doing the right thing. I mean, COVID impacted that, obviously, but it's not, none of this is past tense. And I think the second we look at it like it is, we'll lose it, because we have such an opportunity here to not only look to the future, but to be the future. And that's what we need.
Wonderful quote. Not only look to the future, but be the future. What are you seeing that is working right now?
Wow. Hope. I think you can find pessimism, you can find realism anywhere you want. It's that active and brave choice to choose hope in the face of everything we've got that will lead us out of this. I've stood in climate marches. I've talked to people I'm 17. I talked to people at 14 who were burnt out, thinking about, is it ethical for me to have children? These incredible, horrific ideas. But at the end of it, we can still choose hope. And I think that's what young people have. And that's what we want to give you. It's all about what you can do for us And you're right, we can do a lot. You can do a lot for us. You can vote like you mean it. You can you can talk to your politicians, you can choose your energy, you can do all of that. But we need you to have hope like you're young again. Like this world isn't the result of your parents' choices. Like you don't have to make decisions based off of what you think, how you think the world works. You can look at the most amazing world. You can say, what do I want for all people? How can I be the most compassionate, kindest, and give the best future? But you can also look at the present, and you can offer that. You really can.
That's, yes. If I can quote you back, and I know we had a talk a little while ago. The problem is so big, and yet the response is so small.
Yeah.
Is that's not what I'm hearing from you now.
Oh, you're hearing that from me.
what I'm hearing from you now is that with hope, our response can overcome the big problems.
It's both. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm summing this argument up because we've looked at all the bad things, and the problem is so big. You don't need me to tell you that. You've got Greta Thunberg to tell you that. But you've also got a lot of fear, and you've got a lot of pain. And from older people, you've got a lot of guilt. And from younger people, you've already got a lot of guilt and a lot of burnout. So I'm not going to get very far offering you more pain. If I can offer you a bit of a young person's optimism, to live I'm choosing to live like that anyway. I'm choosing to go forward and make my response proper and right and everything it can be. We can have both hope and we can have realism at looking at the situation as it is, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just making some notes. And again, I'm encouraging anyone, if they have any questions, to put them into the chat. And we'll pop a few questions. So there is still so much you can do. And as you say, hope, you're making me think of voting for a Barack Obama. It's a shame you're not of voting age, because I could vote for you now if you're running for. Don't tell Susan Templeman that. I'm sure Emily won't tell her this. She won't be watching this. It's fine. Just between you and me, right? But it's and again, I think I have to come back into my generation. I was born at a time when we air conditioning was magic. Cars that had more than 3 gears was magic. And now we've got things like the internet, here, this computer with multiple screens, and I am living a fabulous life because of what I've done and generations before me have done before. So it's going to be I still find it hard to find that it's a perpetuating cycle that's going to stop so that we can roll things back. I know Josh wants to see action now, but we have to convince people to make that action happen. How would you convince an adult now to say, "Oh, handbrake on"?
Yeah. You can tell people and adults everything about how bad it's going to get. You can tell them that. You can, absolutely. And it's always been this faceless, nameless generation, this child, this imaginary child who you have to protect. I want to scrap that idea. They exist, they're here, but that's not how we fix it. You should not be looking at climate change because you do not want to feel guilty for the future that your grandchildren will have to live, that I might have to live. I'm 17. Do not enter this discussion. Do not enter this, stop it now from a place of hesitation or pessimism or not wanting the worst thing to happen. You need to enter it not because it's gonna be bad, but because the world can be so much better. Any single person can find so many flaws with how we live. You talk about air conditioning, you talk about cars, not everyone can have those. I mean, just on a very basic thing, equity, we do not live in an equitable society. We don't live in an equitable world. I'm a feminist. We don't live in that world yet, but we could. And it's not the fact that we'll get there. Perhaps I won't be 80 when we get there. I will not be alive to see it. But it's the action of saying this could happen, and I'm going to make sure that I live every day in the endeavor of it, that you can find so much more peace, because I feel like that's what we're looking for. Yes, we're looking to make a future that our grandchildren can live in, but we're also looking to make a present where we feel like we're making a difference, and where we are making a difference, where we're actively choosing to live with the most love in our hearts, and to put that into our society, I think. So that's very conceptual, I guess, but it's more than environmentalism. It's more than that. It's treating everything like we can create the society that we mean to give and mean to live in for everyone.
So your message in summary is that with hope, we can do better. We can do so much more better. And with that doing better, we will make the changes with the adults that Josh wants to see. We have to put the tools in action that Lily is talking about.
Absolutely.
To make the right decisions on what options we have, as what Peter was talking about, and to give, as you were saying, that hope and that possibility for a future to the people that Olivia or
Emily,
Emily we're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it connects to all of those things. We're all coming from the same core issue, and we're all wanting to offer the same bright future. Young people are afraid, and we do need to be, but we can look for something brighter. We can choose that.
Let me wrap you up by asking you a question. What, if you could change one thing, what would you see changed?
One thing.
One thing. Climate change. Would you like to see the right decisions come out of COP26? Would you like to see Morrison voted out and replaced? Yeah.
One change.
I'm going to ask this same question to all of our speakers tonight. So you can all think about this right now.
Yeah.
And I can see little beads of perspiration forming on your brow. If you want, we can come back.
No, I can do it. I'd like to see every single person living each day like they can make a difference. Not being left behind, not feeling like their time has expired, but like every day is an opportunity to offer the youth a better future, but to offer themselves the present that they wanted as a child, that they wanted when they were young and that they want now, and to put that same hope and that same equity and that feminism and that wonder and that joy back into what might be a dark future, but replace it with something that we get to choose. Yeah.
Very good. Very nice. Nicely said. Josh, I'll invite you back off mute. And if you were going to see something change right now, what would you like to see changed?
It's $1 million question. Oh, I'd like more hats. I think Jasmine said it quite well. I'd like to see all people pushing for the kind of change we need to see. All people envisioning a world in which we've solved these problems and working towards that world. I think that's well said.
Yeah. Emily. Now I'm going to mix it a little bit for you. And I'm still stuck on this 14-year-old being burnt out. What do you say to a 14-year-old who's burnt out?
There are people working to make this a better place, a better country for you to live. And I hope that you can be a part of the change that you need to see.
Okay, thank you. If you could change one thing, would there be something you would jump onto?
Oh yeah, kick ScoMo out and put some of these brilliant young women in the Zoom in.
Okay. Lily, what would you change right now?
It's a really difficult question. And
It is.
Yeah. And I think Jasmine and Emily have put it really, really well. And I think one thing that would be really, really great to see is just everyone being hopeful and feeling like they can act. I think that's really important. And it does seem like something that we're missing sometimes, and we definitely need it.
Yeah. Yeah. Peter.
Yep. So yeah, it's a difficult question because there's so much that needs changing. I mean, I was gonna say a price on carbon would be nice, but really, what I envision for the future, especially, I mean, if I'm coming from an energy equity perspective, is that ironically, although I work for an energy retailer, for the future, I want energy retailers to not exist. That's one thing I would change about our sort of outlook on energy.
Okay. I know I put you all on the spot, and this is an unprepared question, so I appreciate the difficulty, but it was, as everyone was talking, I could see that theme of hope coming through, and I could hear that everyone was saying, yes, we want to see change happening. We want it to move. So I'm just curious as to how you can influence us. Yes.
So I mean, I think that hope is definitely a very useful thing to have. If there's one thing I could say to give everyone a little bit more hope is the federal government are not as much in control of our energy outlook as you might think. Really, the people pulling the strings behind the scenes is the energy market operator, which are very much on track to having renewables fast-tracked into the energy mix. And so that's one fact that really gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Yep. Olivia. Yes, we had to come to you, Olivia.
So one thing to change, I think, hard question. I'm gonna flip it and say I'd like everyone to be living in an environment and a society where we don't have to be told to be hopeful anymore. I think that would be lovely if we don't have to be told to be optimistic just for the rest of our lives.
Very nice, very nice. We will say that if anyone wants to throw a question, raise your hand on the chat, or put it in. Raise your hand on the gallery, and we'll Serena will be keeping an eye out for anyone that does raise their hand. Before you jump in there, Roy, and I know you're sitting there chomping at the bit. Lynn Sinclair did put a question into the chat, and it wasn't to anyone specific, but I think I'll throw it to Olivia. That the thought was, we need more school counsellors, not chaplains, to be on hand for students. Is that the sort of thing you'd agree with?
I'd 100% agree with that. I don't think we should bring religion into psychology and counselling within schools. One thing that is positive that's happening in schools are the student support officers are being employed across schools. Katoomba High has about 3, and a few of them are working with Headspace and the interagency group in the mountains to bring mental health help to the students. So that is one positive. But definitely more school counsellors would be excellent, and getting rid of chaplaincy would be great too.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Roy, sorry to jump in there.
You're right. You're right, Doug. Yeah, just listening to you all, what worries me is that I don't think that you've got a feeling of a vision for Australia that is much more positive. Like there is If we electrify everything through renewable energy, we will be able to adapt, and we'll have to adapt to a different way of living with more extreme weather, that's for sure. But there is a vision, a positive vision for the future, if we just embrace renewable energy properly and we electrify everything, as I said. And I would like you to know much more about that world, because it's a different world to where we're in at the moment, but it's not that much worse. How about that?
I might jump in here. I mean, I think we do the type of, the example that you gave there. I think we do have the knowledge, and I mean, Peter's speech. Oh my God, I don't know how he put a PhD in like 10 minutes, but he did. I think I think we have the knowledge. I think it's just this frustration that if we have this vision and we have also the passion to make it real, like, why aren't we given the decision-making power? Or like, why do we have to continue to convince people that such a vision is important when it seems so common sense? Like, it seems so, and I don't know if that's because, I mean, I was taught climate change when I was in, year 8 science. Like, it's just always been a fact growing up for us. And so I think we have that vision and we want the change and we have that passion. I just think that some of the negativity comes from the frustration that we can't actually put all of our knowledge and all of our expertise into action sometimes.
I can understand that frustration. I'm very frustrated at the moment too with the political situation we're in. But yeah.
Oops. And Fitzgerald, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. You've all brought something really different and so many dimensions to the forum, and I really appreciate that. And I'm painfully aware, and I find myself annoying friends who are saying, "Oh, the young people," and saying, "Shut up! It's us. We are in the position." Particularly older people who aren't full-time working, we are the workforce. We are who should be doing the work. We should be behind you and holding you and pushing you forward, because you're right, you're much sexier than we are. That's a media term. Sorry, really bad choice of words. Pardon me. But we aren't, like, no one wants to look at what we're saying, but we have the smarts and the contacts and the wealth to do it. And you have the voice and the hope and the desperation so we need to keep working together, we really do. One thought that I had, Serena and I were talking about this today, and it's a cockamamie idea, but I think I think it kind of ties in with what you're saying. I had no intention of raising it, but the idea that we sit and wait for a government that has done nothing but prove that it's not going to do anything useful to do something just seems to me like, the definition of madness. Keep doing what you do and you get what you get. So my question is there scope for looking, like, we're all in the kind of Macquarie area, right, Electorate? Is there scope for looking at, well, what is it that we want to do to add to the solution within our geographical area, and then just go to our politicians and say, we want our future to look like this. Forget waiting for them, and let's come up with a vision that we can then lobby to bring about in our own patch. What Peter was saying about the micro kind of approach, the idea that this doesn't have to be centralised and it doesn't have to be led externally, but that this is what I took away from what you said, Peter, which is reinforcing this idea of a micro kind of sense of community economy. Why don't we just start that leading up to the next election? People are saying it could be on the 10th of December. I would love us to envisage what we want for Macquarie and then take it to our politicians and say, okay, in the plains, don't flood them. Let's put in a floating factory to make turbines and solar panels. And instead of importing them from China, which is making them cheap because they're burning coal. That's the only reason we are actually destroying the planet while we're importing these renewables because of the nature of the manufacture. So let's say we want to become a closed loop, what do you call it, circular economy powerhouse within our floodplains that need to be allowed to be floodplains. There's one idea, a vision that we say we want to manufacture, we want to give Hawkesbury alternative industry that is a green and sustainable. Why not? Let's just push an idea.
I was going to throw to Emily and Josh to see if either one of you two wanted to give us an answer on that. How do we put that vision to the politicians?
Oh, well, I mean,
how do we decide on a vision? That is, let's say, start thinking about visions of what we want is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it takes good organisation, but
that's what we can do.
Yes, yeah, and you know,
great at that.
Susan's door is always open. You know, it's
not to go to Susan. It's not take it to your politician today. It's forget the politicians for the moment. I'm saying as a community, let's do the visioning and get it to a point where we come up with an idea. I'm not saying take it to Susan. I'm saying like if you had a pitch, right? Like once you have something, you know. Yeah. You know. Yeah. I think the frustrating thing for us and for Susan particularly has been being in opposition for the entire time that she's been in Parliament. It's really and look, honestly, I'm not saying, definitely not talking to politicians now or putting pressure on politicians. I'm saying step back as a community, as individuals who want to fix things. Let's stop taking things to politicians until we know what we want. What is it that we want?
There's real power in the community, you know, with young people's visions and ideas and hopes and passions, and with, you know, older people's, you know, resources, wherewithal, existing skills, etc., and professional skills, whatever, to formulate an amazing vision that belongs to the community. And so I just want to acknowledge Susan is an incredible member. And I'm quite certain she would take great ideas and do lots of great things with them, whether she's in opposition or in government.
Yeah.
But if the vision belongs to the community, in the end, it doesn't matter who's in power.
Who's in power? Yeah.
And so I know, you know, while I recognise it's really important who is in power, it makes a big difference. God, we know that. But if the vision belongs to the community and the drive and the energy comes from the community, in the end, it doesn't matter. You know, in the end, the weight and the momentum and the intention of the community is too strong for anything or anyone who might want to get in the way. And but you know, acknowledging again, members of Parliament who are on board are so important and so valuable. So you know, the two go together. But yeah, I think it is a really interesting question to talk about vision, and I think that I would love to hear at another time, or maybe it's a process that we can incorporate. Resilient Blue Mountains has been planning to have, you know, a wonderful visioning day, you know, a futuring day or a dreaming day, as we started calling it. And of course, you have to do that together. It's really hard in a pandemic. So I think it's probably something that isn't, I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but it would be so exciting to.
It'd be great to do it as an electorate. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great to have your, you know, younger person viewpoints and others as well, and to bring them together. And I think some of the message I was getting from Jasmine in particular, as you were rounding out pulling together what everyone was saying, is there's no, you know, older generations, younger generations, and when it's our turn, we have to do this together. It's not, you know, it isn't either or. Now, can I ask you, you fantastic speakers. Did you learn anything off each other tonight? And please tell me,
Yeah,
don't just nod.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was incredible to hear everyone. I'm a youth counsellor, so a lot of my role is talking to young people, quite young people actually, from like 14 to 20. But it was awesome to hear some of you guys' expertise, particularly, but also just from everyone. We share so many ideas in common, but also organisations and kind of a few worlds apart in some really wonderful ways. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting in contact with you guys in the future. And it's awesome to just hear how young people's drive is, we have a shared message, and it was awesome to hear that. Yeah.
We have a question, and so Adrian.
I just want to say something to add to the hope. Now, this is a personal story, and I hope I don't embarrass my family. But I just want to say that as a child, I had a vision, because I just felt I could see our wild areas around us just being gobbled up by suburbia moving in. And what I had as a beautiful playground as a war baby, we were even before the baby boomers, I just saw beautiful playgrounds disappearing, and it just made me so sad. And that impacted me as a child, and I still remember that feeling. But later on, you know, when we were married, we decided to go and live in the country. And so my daughter, Serena, grew up in the country on a little farm, you know, close to the animals and, you know, surrounded by nature. And I just want to say that, you know, that obviously has had some impact on her rather than growing up in this city central. And now we have Lily as well, with her passion about climate and preserving, you know, what we have. And I just want to say, you know, just a vision that you have when you're young, sometimes it can, you know, give you enough hope and plant a seed in your heart that will continue to develop and perhaps, and I hope for you too, that it bears fruit in the future. I'm delighted with the fruit I see in front of me right now that came from that vision that just said, you know, this is terrible to see what's happening to our environment around us. Yeah. So keep that hope alive, everyone. And remember, little things you do count, and little things you hide in your heart do count.
Thank you, Mama.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Look, I think it's a really good point. And Liz, I'm going to put you on the spot for 2 minutes and get you to come off mute and tell us, I mean, 2 minutes is very long, but something about the vision for the Blue Mountains and planetary health. And one of the things that's so strong, comes through so strongly, is connection to nature. And there's no doubt that I've had that growing up, and it's instilled in me I love this country. I love it, you know, with my whole heart. I love the birds, I love the plants, I love being able to get out into it. And you know, that's something I have grown up with. Not everyone has that. But it is part of what teaches us to love the earth, to love nature, and to live more in harmony with it. So I'm going to spotlight you, Liz, because you do have something to tell us that's very hopeful.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks very much, Serena. Well, it is very exciting that Blue Mountain City Council has made a commitment to restore planetary health and to make that the highest priority. So Council is working through every department and through every area to make planetary health our main focus. And we became the first council in Australia to adopt the rights of nature. And so we're trying to help everyone see that all life is equally valuable and that we need to respect and understand Indigenous wisdom and go right back to history to learn everything from the past, but also have a deep time vision for the future. So it was really lovely today because one of the documents came through from one of the staff, and I saw in the document that they put through, they were doing planning for 5 years, for 20 years, and for 500 years. And I thought, yes! So It's getting through that we understand that we need to take the actions for building a safe, healthy world for future generations. And planetary health is about all aspects of health, social, all the parts of nature, the way we work together, the way we treat one another. And anything you do to yourself harms the rest of the natural world. Anything you do to the rest of the natural world ultimately will impact you. So it's understanding a very holistic vision for the future. And the will at council is really, really strong. And we have amazing people on our advisory committee, including Serena. We have a wonderful steering group with leading managers at council. And I've never seen commitment like this before in my life. And I've worked for lots of councils. I was a climate adaptation officer for Central New South Wales. And this council is extraordinary. The vision, the commitment, the hard work that everyone is putting into this vision to protect the world for you, for the future. That is the big overriding message that is coming through. And yesterday, one of the people on our committee rang me after the meeting, and he's at Mount Irvine. And he said he'd just come from his third landowner. This is the area where they had the terrible fires. Remember the terrible bushfires? He said every day they have to drive through the burnt, savaged areas to leave. They can't forget it ever. They have to look at it over and over again. And he had 3 landowners who are giving over large sections of their property to plant the trees that will take 500 years to grow, and they will never see the result of what they're doing. They're just replanting the rainforest timbers that used to be there because they want to recreate a rainforest for the future, for you guys. And all of them, after the fires, just got together. I was in a hall and I just started crying because all these landowners said, we know this isn't for us. We're giving our land back over for future generations. So you might not hear it because our media runs on the principle that if it bleeds, it leads. Our media doesn't focus on all the stories of the fabulous people who are truly busting a gut for you guys. And there are a lot of them. And there are a lot of them in our council. And far more than you would even believe. There's a lovely article that was written in 2006 for Mother Jones magazine by a lady called Julia Whitty. And she said there are 12 global warming tipping points. And if we go past those 12 global warming tipping points, we'll tip into catastrophic climate change. But she also went through a lot of discussion about biology and the history of humanity and other species. And she said, after going through that long discussion, she said, what I want to reassure you is there's also a 13th tipping point, and that's humanity. And it can tip just as quickly as the climate change tipping point. And I just want to end with one other thing from physics. In physics, we learn that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When you look at the craziness of the world at the moment, that's the equal and opposite reaction to the massive change that has started. So it's happening. It's there. It's just the media isn't letting you know that. So just whenever you feel bad about what you're seeing, recognise that it's the equal and opposite reaction to the massive 13th tipping point.
Thanks so much, Liz, and I really appreciate that on short notice. We're nearly out of time. I do want to hand over to Shirley briefly because we're doing something related to this, but a bit different. It's very special next week. Shirley.
Well, you can see that I've got the whole world in the house, folks, and we all do actually, and not to be too silly about it. And we're having this thing, a first school Zoom, which is going to be happening next Wednesday at 2 o'clock for 2:15. And we're just planning it. We're just taking it as it comes. We've got Katoomba North, we've got Megalong, we've got Katoomba Public, and they're already in there doing something and contributing to it. But look, I want to say that I've worked for many years with eco schools. There are 46,000, or my figures may be wrong, but there are a hell of a lot of schools in the world who are working on sustainability. And so if we look at this globe and we just put up a little dot for each of the schools and imagine it glowing. So the global TV show is going to be revived next week.
I think if we're allowed to record it, we will be able to share it, but we'll work that through with the schools. We'll see if what we can do. Thank you, Shirley. And might hand over to Duck to say some final words. And Anne has put something in the chat saying if any of the speakers would like to be part of a visioning process for Macquarie, can you please email me? She's put an email address in the chat. You can also, if you forget or lose it, you can also come through me, or I'll let you know when that's happening. So, but I've really enjoyed tonight. I'm going to hand over to you, Richard.
I'm going to say thank you to all of our speakers tonight. Now, you may not get this quote straight up, but it's from Stephen Stills. Look him up. The quote is, there's something happening here, and there is something happening here. From what I got from everyone tonight, don't lose hope. Keep on being brave. Keep on being courageous. We are the adults with the tools, but you're the young generation with the drive. So keep raising your voices, and we're going to keep on listening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for all our speakers tonight.
Thank you so much, everybody, and I'm quite happy to have you all come off mute and say good night, or say a few words as you're leaving. I think I've invited you to come off mute.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and I must say I'm just so impressed with the other speakers. Lily, that speech was pretty amazing, I must say. So major props.
Yes, we need to get you to a bigger audience.
Yes, definitely.
I'd like to say on behalf of my wife and myself, we are inspired and thrilled at what we've heard tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, much to learn.
Good bunch of eggs, I think. Thank you, everybody, so much. You're the inspiration all around.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks so much for coming.
So wonderful.